What you're about to see are the events that led to 4 fatalities on the Spanish Ranch fire, August 15, 1979. The fire started in the coastal mountains of San Luis Obispo County, adjacent to Highway 166, a thoroughfare that runs between the coast near Santa Maria and the southern San Joaquin Valley. The fire began at 14:02 when a flail mower being operated by a state road crew struck a rock. This fire occurred in an area protected by 3 agencies: the California Department of Forestry, who had primary responsibility, the United States Forest Service, and the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. Among the 3 agencies, the following equipment was dispatched on the initial response: 8 engines, 2 bulldozers, 2 Type 3 air tankers, an air attack supervisor, and a battalion chief. 2 engines, one from the U.S. Forest Service and one from the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, arrived simultaneously at 14:23. Their initial size-up reported the fire at 10 to 15 acres, with a slow to moderate rate of spread under the influence of light northeast winds. The air attack supervisor arrived 5 minutes later and reported the fire to be 75 to 100 acres under the influence of a northwest wind. The size discrepancy is due to the ground forces being unable to see the entire fire. Engine 5379 from the California Department of Forestry arrived 15 minutes later and reported a moderate west wind. Engine 5373 was also part of the California Department of Forestry initial dispatch, but was delayed by mechanical difficulties. Fuel loading in the area ranged from 3 to 4 tons per acre. This is considered to be very light. The lower slopes were covered with light, flashy fuels, with a sparse overstory of blue oak. The middle and upper slopes were covered with yucca, light brush, and scattered juniper, with grass interspersed throughout. The brush had a very high dead-to-live ratio. In this fuel type, live fuel moistures in the 60% range are considered critical. Live fuel samples taken in the fire area showed California sagebrush at 54% and white sage at 66%. Weather observations at the time of the fire, as reported from a station 20 miles to the north, were temperature 84 degrees, relative humidity 26%, with a 10-hour fuel moisture of 5%. These readings were almost exactly the 3-year average for this station. Fair weather cumulus was noted by several individuals in the area as they responded to the fire. In addition, a sounding from Vandenberg Air Force Base southwest of the incident indicated a coastal inversion layer, with the top at 2,250 feet. The winds at 2,000 feet, as measured at this same location, were 13 miles per hour out of the northwest. The fire was burning in mountainous terrain, with elevations ranging from 1,400 to about 2,500 feet. The average slope in the area adjacent to the accident site was 60%, with chimneys present on each side. The initial attack resources established a strategy that consisted of utilizing Highway 166 as the anchor, with direct attack on the flanks in a pincer action, working toward the head of the fire, where air tankers were establishing a retardant line. When Engine 5379 arrived at 1440, the company officer assumed the role of incident commander and continued this initial strategy. Battalion Chief 5312 arrived at 1453 and took over as the incident commander.
Well, the fire activity, by the time I got up Carrizo Canyon Road, had pretty much laid down. What smoke there was coming out of the canyons down there was pretty much going straight up in the air, and there was no active major runs at that time. Everything was kind of laying in. The air tankers had been dropping on it, and they were making their turnarounds down to Galicia for reloads, and it looked like the retardant drops were holding, except we weren't able to get people in there either in engines or on foot yet to back up the drops.
His plan was to continue direct attack on the flanks of the fire while constructing an indirect dozer line on a ridge in front of the fire from Carrizo Canyon Road to the top of Hill 2465. The air tankers were to continue to hold the head of the fire with a retardant line in a drainage to the south of the main ridge, while the indirect line construction was taking place.
We felt with the amount of equipment coming, and I did ask for more outside of the initial attack forces, that we could hold the Carrizo Canyon Road with engines. So the strategy then was to try to find a ridge out here in front of the fire that we could go from Carrizo Canyon Road over to the left or west flank and establish a line and either burn it out or maybe take some direct action when we got hand crews in here on the edge of the fire itself.
The IC discussed this strategy with the following individuals who had arrived after the indirect plan had been put into action: a U.S. Forest Service fire prevention technician from the local area, a battalion chief from the Santa Barbara County Fire Department, and the local Forest Service District Fire Management Officer. No one offered a dissenting opinion to the plan. After this briefing took place, the fire prevention technician expressed concern to the fire management officer in a one-on-one discussion. He was concerned that personnel would be too far out in front of the advance of the fire with no backup protection. The district fire management officer did not concur with this opinion due to the lack of wind and the mild fire behavior. Neither of these individuals mentioned this concern to the IC. You are now looking west along the ridge toward Hill 2465. Dozer 5348 began constructing line towards Hill 2465 at 1530. At 1550, Engine 5373 arrived at the fire, and the IC assigned the captain and his crew of 3 firefighters to work the indirect line that was being constructed by the bulldozer. Their assignment was to walk the dozer line to the top of Hill 2465, provide protection to Dozer 5348, and to backfire only in the event that it was necessary for safety. The captain and his crew were wearing all their required safety equipment. In addition, they equipped themselves with hand tools, 2 back pumps, and fusees. They began to walk up the line at approximately 1555. A second California Department of Forestry battalion chief arrived at Carrizo Canyon Road at the same time as Engine 5373 and was given the assignment of being a lookout for the IC. This individual was a fire behavior instructor and also happened to have a fire shelter with him. In 1979, fire shelters were new and not required nor available to everyone in the California Department of Forestry. After appraising the fire situation, he was quoted in the investigation report as stating that the fuel wasn't heavy, there was no immediate fire threat, and the wind did not feel unusual. He was further quoted as stating that he paid very little attention to the wind, and that he felt perfectly comfortable in his normal safety gear. He therefore elected to leave his fire shelter behind in his pickup. After donning his gear, he began to follow the dozer line toward Hill 2465. At this time, the crew from Engine 5373 was approximately 700 yards ahead of him up the dozer line. At 1610, a dozer from Santa Barbara County Fire Department arrived on the scene and was given the assignment to follow the first dozer toward Hill 2465 and to widen the line by 1 blade width. These instructions were amended within minutes due to an increase in fire activity, and he was given a new assignment to proceed directly to Dozer 5348's position to assist him. At 1615, Dozer 5348 was 100 yards short of Hill 2465 and working toward the top. At this time, the fire activity was beginning to increase, and the fire had burned through the retardant line in the drainage south of Hill 2465. The fire then began a run straight up a chimney toward the crest of the ridge. As this occurred, the air attack supervisor advised Dozer 5348 that he should probably start back down the dozer line, which he did. The dozer operator requested air tanker support, but was told by air attack that none was available. He then quickly constructed a 4-blade wide safety island, dropped his fire-resistant side curtains, and wrapped himself in a fire blanket. The air attack supervisor did not know that the crew of engine 5373 was also working on that same ridge. When the fire moved upslope, it came under the influence of a 25 to 30 mile per hour upper-level west wind. This changed the fire behavior from a narrow, topographic-driven finger of fire into a large, wind-driven flame front, moving north and east toward Dozer 5348 and the crew of engine 5373. In a witness statement, the pilot of the air attack plane said that he had never seen a fire move so fast. At this time, the crew of engine 5373 had reached a point 500 yards east of Dozer 5348. The captain of engine 5373 called the IC and informed him that he would be unable to reach Dozer 5348 and that he would have to start firing his line. A few moments later, the captain called the 2nd Battalion Chief and told him the fire had crossed the dozer line. The captain did attempt to fire out around his crew's position with fusees in order to create a safety island, as shown by these fusees found on the fire line and this fusee slag found in and around the fatality site. This effort was unsuccessful, and the captain and 2 members of his crew were overrun by the fire front and died from total body 2nd and 3rd degree burns, as well as inhalation of superheated air. The 3rd member of the crew ran back down the dozer line toward Carrizo Canyon Road. The 2nd Battalion Chief had enough time to get safely back toward Carrizo Canyon Road. The Santa Barbara County dozer operator was overrun on the fire line about 200 yards up from Carrizo Canyon Road. He was able to get off his dozer and use it as a heat barrier when the fire front passed, incurring only minor burns. The 3rd engine crew member was found at 1620 as he stumbled down the dozer line to the location of the Santa Barbara County dozer. He had suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns over 60% of his body. This firefighter died 202 days after the accident. The operator of Dozer 5348 was unhurt. After the flame front passed, he started back down the line and found the bodies of the captain and the 2 firefighters from engine 5373. These are the hard hats that were worn by 2 of the firefighters involved in the burnover. This is the Nomex shirt worn by the captain. An autopsy showed that the captain of engine 5373 had a blood alcohol content of 0.07% and a strong positive indication of methamphetamine in his blood. However, a pathologist is quoted in the investigation report as stating, from a toxicologist's point of view, the judgment of any of the deceased was unimpaired. The weather event that played a part in this accident was set up with strong westerly gradient winds. During events such as this, thermal vertically oriented air currents, such as those found over mountainous terrain or on fires, can rise into the more stable but fast-moving gradient winds aloft. The ensuing mixing action may allow the strong gradient winds to surface. These winds surfaced for a short duration several times during the fire. Eyewitnesses reported that the winds surfaced for only 10 to 20 minutes. One of these surfacing actions contributed to the accident. You have just seen the events that occurred on the Spanish Ranch fire. The instructor will now facilitate a discussion about the use of fire safety guidelines by the involved personnel, the strategic and tactical decisions that were made, and the human factors that contributed to this burnover incident.